February 18th edition of Trips and Traps. Richard Migliore, Travis Stone, and Richie. Here we are, middle of February, counting down the days till spring. Had a shortened weekend this past weekend. Had some snow on Monday. There was a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot going on weather-wise, but I still don't think we can complain. All in all, not a terrible winter so far. I like the races we're looking at today because I think it's a mixed bag of things. And we talk about trips, and there's a ride that I can't defend. And then we'll talk about some other races that look like, well, what was the rider doing? But I think especially one might be a trap because I think the horse was difficult.
Interesting mix of races, like you said. Potentially a trap, maybe even a trip, though, depending how it shakes out next time around. Let's start right out on the February 11th, 7th race, allowance race, going 2 turns. Take a look at a horse called Backside of the Moon, who's in the yellow. We're going to stop the video, have a few strides out so we can get a clear picture. There's Backside of the Moon here. Not the best of starts, is going to get shuffled just a little bit early on, angles over toward the rail. Tell us about the trip to the first turn for Backside of the Moon.
Yeah, you know, he looked like he just took him a little while to find his stride, Travis. And I think Mike Leslie did a good job of getting over to the rail and then going forward enough to make sure he held the established position. There was a horse that wanted to get up outside of him, and he didn't allow that horse to get in there because it would have made things uncomfortable for him. All in all, I thought he had a good trip through the first turn in spite of breaking a bit slow.
You had mentioned that he didn't look that comfortable at certain points of this race. For a horse player or a racing fan trying to learn how to watch races and analyze these videos, what are some of the things you want to look for in terms of a horse feeling comfortable at midpoints of the race?
Well, we're going to see more in the stretch what I was talking about. I felt like he was running a bit with the emergency brake on in the stretch, still in behind horses, never really getting a clear path, an unencumbered path. I thought he had run here, Travis, and I thought this was where if he could have gone forward, he might have had been more effective. I think maybe that's the best way to put it. And you're going to see here, the 2 horses are going to kind of start to stop abruptly. Now, you know that Mike Leslie's looking, who's he going to follow? Now, you're going to see he's going to have to steady here, trying to search for some place to go. And meanwhile, the first and second place finishes are revving up on the far outside. And they're wide, but at least they're keeping their momentum.
It's hard to regain momentum when you talk about losing momentum on the far turn of a 2-turn race because horses get tired as the race progresses, and it's hard to find that lost energy once again.
Particularly on the dirt. You see on the turf a lot of horse can steady, and he'll still have a turn of foot. Now, I thought that Mike might have been better served as he came into the stretch when the winner and the runner-up were rallying on the outside, maybe to angle out and get out in the clear. Now, it looked like Backside of the Moon may have been wanting to lug in a little bit. Mike wound up all the way back to the fence after angling to about the 3 or 4 path. And I just think that move there really slowed his momentum and kind of mentally made that horse kind of take pause, like, oh, I still have a moving block in front of me. You see horses get covered up, they find daylight, they find more, and I thought in mid-stretch he was running with what I like to say the emergency brake on.
Not a fairly decent horse, 80 buyers in the past. This was an allowance race, so there's a lot of different ways you can go with Backside of the Moon. Might be able to catch a price if he finds a better spot where he can sort of fit better with the competition. That was a tough group as well for him to face. So some legitimate things to look at going forward for Backside of the Moon. Same day, we're going to go to the last race on February the 11th. This is a big field sprinting on the main track. We're going to watch Brigetta, who unfortunately is going to be tough to see as they come out of the gate, just sort of buried behind horses here. There's Brigetta right there in the red cap with the blue blinkers. The eventual winner broke from the inside and stumbled. It was a pretty big effort there. This is the one we were talking about before coming on the air. This might be a trap. It might be a trip. I think it depends on what the next race looks for. Brigetta's one-way speed does not break near the front and gets relegated to a pocket trip inside.
Yeah, and then I think that's where her troubles begin. She's going to have obvious trouble having to steady in behind horses, lack room. But I think part of that was because she was lugging in. Now, what you pointed out to me, she's better on the lead, which would make sense because you don't have to wrestle with a horse that lugs in when they're on the lead. 90% of horses won't hit the fence. They're smart enough not to do that. But you're going to see Jaime Rodriguez has a very hard time getting out and around horses, and probably compounding the fact that she lugs in, that she has horses outside of her, so she's running away from that pressure as well. And you're going to see what I mean when her head gets turned around, you know, a bit sideways here, and he's looking for some place to come out. See, I'm sure he would have liked to have continued out at that point, but at this point, she is lugging in. She's a trap if she gets a similar trip to this day, meaning if she doesn't make the lead.
It was interesting, when they turned for home, there was a little bit of a seam, and it felt like he wanted to commit to that hole. That hole closed up. The horse was lugging in a little bit. It just felt like compounding problems. The one thing I thought was encouraging, however, is when you have one-way speeds like that don't get the trip that they want, they often give it up. She kind of ran on a little bit in the stretch and was able to re-rally for third. You never really think of Brigetta as a re-rallier in any sort of situation.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I think horses are a lot like people. Some people, when things are going their way, are great. When they have a little adversity, they're not so good. But she showed at least the ability to keep running in spite of some adversity. I'm just not convinced that maybe, A, she's fast enough to outrun the kind of horses she's facing here as opposed to, let's say, Finger Lakes.
Yep.
And the fact that she was lugging in, I think maybe Jaime Rodriguez is going to get more heat from that ride than he probably deserves.
See what happens next time out. Like with all of the horses we talk about on Trips and Traps, it really depends on what the next race circumstances are and what the price is going to be. You need value. It doesn't matter if you're looking at a trip or a trap. Second race, the following day, February the 12th. These are maiden claimers going 2 turns on the main track. We're going to take a look at a horse called Threes Are Wild, who has bet a little bit in this race, went off at 3-1, is going to break near the back with the pink cap and the famous Michael Dub colors. Threes Are Wild, not the best of starts.
And this dictated the rest of the trip for this horse. Starts are so important, whether it's 6 furlongs or a mile and a half. You don't want to be out of position early. Once he broke slowly, he's out of position. And now Kendrick Carmouche has to play the hand dealt him. He said, well, now I've got to be patient. And you're going to see at one point down the backstretch, this horse gets keen on him and makes what I believe was a middle move that cost him.
It's interesting to note that this was Threes Are Wild's only second start on the main track and started out the career on turf 4 consecutive races. It felt like climbing a little bit early on, sort of trying to get comfortable as the race developed, ended up wide to the backstretch run. But from this point to the wire, is going to put in a bit of a move, a wide move at that.
And this is the kind of move that does not work on the inner track. I mean, he got up inside of the horse outside of him. I can't even see the number there. And
7, I believe.
The 7 horse. And the 7 went forward to basically keep him in his place. And he had it kind of steady. And now when he puts him out in the clear and he doesn't have that kickback in his face, he jumps in the bit. Now, Kendrick's not asking him to do this, but the horse is doing it, expending a lot of energy. And we don't see that wide, sustained run win races on the inner track unless you're much the best. This is more of an old Belmont balcony move. It doesn't work on a mile racetrack.
Yeah, going 3.5 furlongs while 4 or 5 wide on the inner. It's not going to cut it out. Ultimately, as the race shakes loose, you're going to find that Threes Are Wild, and utilizing the track as data, which we talked about last week, is going to travel approximately 21 more feet than the ultimate winner does, who's resolved right to the inside there, which is worth 2 to 3 lengths. The runner-up, 40 more feet than the runner-up, which is worth 5.5 lengths. So this race was better than it looks and is going to look on paper.
You know, it's something very subtle that most people won't pick up on. He came off the turn on his right lead. He was already on his right lead. So how much of the turn did he run on his right lead and get tired? You know, I've heard it explained, and I think it's a great way to explain it. You're in the airport. You're running with a suitcase in your hand to try to catch your flight. As you get tired, you'll switch to the other hand and give yourself a break, and so on and so forth. I think that's a great way to explain a horse with leads. And how long was he on that right lead for? Because he was on the right lead long before he hit the straightaway.
I remember watching a video with Angel Cordero Jr. when I was a kid, and he talked about carrying a bucket of water while running. And if you carry it in your right hand, eventually you have to switch to your left hand to give your right arm and just your body a bit of a break. Same sort of situation.
Exactly. And I think he was on his right lead for at least 3/8 of a mile. He had every right to flatten out between the middle move and that. And I think with a clean start, he gets a much different trip.
Wide trip, wide move, long move. Never works on the inner. Moving on to the 6th race, same day. Now, this is an interesting race. There's a lot going on here. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to watch Zippity Zoom, who's going to break from the inside. Now, Zippity Zoom is a horse with a little bit of ability, some talent, and some speed. This is a good start from the rail, right? I mean, you're breaking forward. It's what happens from here that just puzzles me.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it as a former rider. I'm post 1. That simplifies things for me. My horse gets away this clean. I'm head up for the lead at this point. I am not yielding that position. I am going to continue to go forward. And if you want to outrun me, you're going to have to go a lot faster and spread the field out. And Junior Alvarado chose to take a hold of his horse and allow the 4, Splendid Gold, to clear him. And Splendid Gold goes on and runs a big race and wins. Is the race different, though, if Junior holds his position? And we're going to see now, that was just the beginning of the problem, because now if you're going to take back off of Splendid Gold, you've got to stay close enough up to his heels so as not to allow that next flight of horses to come in and take your position. And now you're seeing he's getting completely shuffled out of the race.
I mean, he just completely lost all the advantage he had right at the break. I circled Splendid Gold because she's very talented right now. She's won 4 races in a row. This is a big win for her. But Zippity Zoom, who wants to be close, the passive ride relegates her all the way back. I mean, she's at least 9 or 10 lengths back at this point. It's supposed to be game over. She's going to switch outside, come with a little bit of a run. But this could have all been avoided had he been more aggressive right off the mark.
I think if he's more aggressive, he probably finishes second because the winner was very good. Let's not take anything away from the winner. But I think also what compounds this, and what's frustrating the horse players, is it looks like here he's going to be a clear-cut fourth. And Junior basically kind of said, well, I've had a horrible trip. I'm just going to let her coast in, and then she gets nailed for fourth. And that's problematic because obviously it affects superfectors and other wagers. I know what happens in a rider's mind when you've made a mistake, and I think if we were to ask Junior directly, he would say that was a mistake not to go forward into the turn. Your tendency is to get deflated and basically give up. But you've got to continue to put out because the horse players deserve that, the owner, the trainer deserve it. I'm sure this is one Junior Alvarado would like to have to do over.
It's encouraging that Zippity Zoom did seem to have a little bit of run late in the race, despite getting shuffled back, steadied out of the race completely. A horse to look at going forward. I know it's frustrating that they get caught for fourth, and I hear you on all those angles, but at least as horse players, we can now take this and say, okay, next time around, Zippity Zoom gets a look.
Well, and also, let's be fair about this. We don't know how she felt to him. We don't know how she came back out of the race. If Zippity Zoom now has a layoff of 3 or 4 months, you go, wow, maybe something was amiss with her physically. And that's something only a rider can tell. And that's what I don't know. So I have to be fair about that point.
Sure. Zippity Zoom. I'm going to stable watch the horse. We'll see what happens next time around. Hopefully there are no 3 to 4 month layoffs. Hopefully there are no 3 to 4 month layoffs for you on Trips and Traps next time. If you want, we want to hear from you. Tripsandtraps at NYRAInc.com. We'd like to hear any ideas you have for Trips and Traps horses each week and out. And back at it this week with another week of racing. Should be fun.
Well, hopefully we'll have 4 full days of racing, so we'll have a lot of races to draw from.
Richard Migliore, Travis Stone, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.